Wider all the way out. Top.
Hello all. Welcome to the second session. I hope I'm audible and clear. Someone could confirm.
I'm clear.
Yeah, all
Hi,
right.
it's
Yeah,
okay.
thank you. So, welcome to the second session for strategic management. In this session, we will be looking into the strategic implementation phase and evaluation and control phase. So before we go into the present session, let's brush up through what we have discussed in the last session so that we get an idea. We'll be in page with what we are going to discuss now. So in the first session, we have seen what is strategy. We have seen what is strategic management and the various stages of strategic management. We have in that session we have discussed in detail about strategic formation. So strategic formation has got 5 stages: strategic intent, external audit, internal audit, then generic strategy alternatives, and corporate business and functional strategy. So strategic intent means vision, mission, business definition, goals and objectives. External audit is the audit done for the micro and macro environment, which is external to the organization, and it could be done through political, economic, social, and technological, environmental, and legal factors. Then for micro environment, it could be done through the Potter's Five Force model and value chain model. Then internal environment and analysis is nothing but the self-appraisal of the organization, and it could be done through EFE metrics and IFE metrics. Then the generic strategy alternatives are stability, growth, or defensive mechanism, which the organization is undertaken in the due course of action. And then we have seen the corporate, business, and functional level strategies. So that is what we have looked into the earlier session. And now in the second session, we are going to look detail into the second stage of strategic management, that is strategic implementation. And once strategic implementation is discussed, we will be going through strategic evaluation and control mechanisms. So let's start with strategic implementation. So what is strategic implementation? So in this stage, the formations, whatever strategy we have formed for the organizational objective achievement is being implemented or put into action. So this is the action stage where whatever strategy has been formed in the initial stages implemented or test waters here. So in this stage, what happens is the organization has to undertake various stages or steps in which the formation, the strategy in paper is being applied to achieve the organizational objective. So this is the action stage where the formatted strategy at various levels of the organization, maybe for the business level, for individual level, or the corporate level, or maybe for various other multiple levels of the organization is being applied into the organizational department so that the final objective is achieved in a more efficient manner. So strategic implementation could either be forward-linking implementation or backward-linking implementation. In forward-linking implementation, it is a step towards the implementation. That is like it's a forward action is undertaken. So the strategy is implemented based on the plan made or the strategic actions made, and the organizational resources available is adjusted accordingly. So a strategy is formed and it is implemented with the organizational restructure or resources. So the constant here is strategy formed. So based on the form strategy, the organization need to adjust. And it gives a direction for implementation. Whereas in backward linking strategy, what happens is the strategy is formed based on the available resources and organization. The organization doesn't change here, or there is no restructuring or addition or deletion of resources happen, whereas the formed strategy will be adjusted so as to suit the organizational requirement. Now, there won't be any change in organizational structure, but the changes will be done to the strategy form. So this is just due to the circumstances. Maybe there is like lack of proper resources available. So the strategies formed will be in accordance with whatever is required within the organization. However, for forward-looking strategy, the strategies will be much more advanced and the organization has to adjust itself. The resources has to adjust itself so as to suit the strategy formed. Now let's see the various stages or steps in strategic implementation. So we have seen strategic implementation is the stage where the strategy in paper, the formed strategy is put into action. So the first stage in strategic implementation is developing an action plan. So action plan is nothing other than an implementation plan. So implementation plan is developed. So implementation plan is developed based on the goals and objectives. So a plan is developed based on goals and objectives. Then the plan will give proper detailing on specific tasks to be done. So the plan will cover the goals and objectives of the organization, specific tasks to be achieved, or whatever the actions need to be undertaken for the implementation. Then at what time? So the duration required for the implementation will be specified here in the action plan. So when a particular step need to be undertaken and at what duration it should be completed. These things were discussed in the action plan. Then the responsibility will be cleared here. So who is going to take what action? Which department is going to undertake various stages here? So for example, if a marketing strategy is developed, so the responsibilities undertaken will be cleared in this action plan, which what has to be done, who is going to undertake what responsibility, who is accountable to complete the process, who's going to implement various stages, etc., will be detailed in the action plan. Then the resources required. The action plan also gave a clarity on whatever resources is required. Resources doesn't mean finance only, but the required skills, the technology, and finance, then whatever new hirings need to be required, etc., will be much more clear in the action plan. Action plan. So the first stage of implementation is preparing an action plan. Once an action plan is created, the next stage is resource allocation. So resource allocation happens in the second stage where there will be further clarity on whatever resources is required for the implementation of the plan and at what stages these resources are required. So for example, if finance is required, at this stage, the organization will adjust their budget so that the required finance is inculcated. So at this stage, the organization plan, whatever human talent is required, which skill set need to be acquired. If the organization could train its existing employees to acquire a particular skill set, they will do that. Or if they want to hire more people to suit a particular action, they'll do that at this stage. And acquiring of technology happen at this stage. So the first step of implementation is developing an action plan. Second stage is resource allocation. And the third stage is adjusting the organizational structure. So the organization has developed an action plan. We have identified the resources, optimum. Hello, excuse me, if you could mute yourself. All right. So at this stage, The organizational structure will be adjusted so as to accommodate the changes. The structure of the organization need to be aligned to accommodate the strategy itself. So if there need to be any restructuring required, the organization will do the restructuring. They will make sure the environment is receptive for the change. That is, the resistance will be reduced. The roles and responsibilities will be communicated properly to the people involved. For example, if a business level strategy is developed and it requires the lower level employees to be adjusted to whatever requirements need to be done for the strategy to be involved, and they will be communicated properly what are their roles, what is expected out of them, what they are need to do. These things will be properly set and the environment will be made receptive for a change. And for a corporate level strategy, the organization will adjust it, corporate restructure. They will make the corporate restructuring itself so that the environment is receptive. And proper communication channels will be set at this stage. Communication channels, like if the they will decide whether the communication should be formal or informal, whether it should be forward communication or backward communication. All these decisions has been made in the stage, and the organization will be ready to accept the new plans or action plan required to implement. The next stage is communicating the strategy. At this stage, the whichever team or whichever level is involved is being communicated to understand what need to be done. So they will be clearly communicated. The required actions and plan need to be undertaken will be clearly communicated to the stakeholders. Stakeholders doesn't just mean the top management, but the employees involved or the customers. Maybe if the customers will be won't be aware about certain changes at this stage, maybe they will also be communicated. So the communication strategy is communicating the strategy to the stakeholders at this stage is very important so as to reduce the resistance itself. And communicating the strategy or the changes in the action plan, or what is to be going, what changes are going to undertake in the organization need to be communicated, because they give proper clarity to the people involved. And with proper clarity, there will be more efficiency. With efficiency, the end goals are achieved in a better manner. So, for example, if the organization is going to undertake a marketing strategy, and the strategy has been developed based on all the formation tools we have discussed earlier. So, the strategy is now set in paper, and the organization is going to implement it. They made an action plan, they identified and acquired adequate resources, and they made the environment all receptive to these changes, and now it is communicated to the stakeholders in marketing. So the department is aware. So if there is no proper communication, what happens is they won't be able to accept the change. They won't be able to make themselves available to the change. So proper communication is required, and communication should be clear and defined. For example, if the organization is going to undertake a new marketing strategy for implementing in or for developing a new product and releasing the new product to the particular new market. In that case, the ad agency involved, they are also the stakeholders. Or the marketing agency also need to be communicated properly. They need to be aware that the strategies they need to undertake should be for the introduction of the product. So in that case, there need to be proper clarity. This is not for market development, but just for the introduction of a new product. In that case, only they will be able to ensure that they form the strategy so the market is aware about a new product. So the clear communication need to be done at the stage. Or for example, if there are various or multiple level of organization is involved in a particular strategy formation, for example, in case of marketing itself, if the organization has decided upon upgrading their product or boosting their business, or they are going to increase their sales. In that case, then the finance department should also be communicated in advance so that they will be able to acquire enough finance and make their budget accordingly, so that at the time the strategy, the marketing campaign starts, they will be able to finance the strategy. So the communication should be done to all the levels involved. For whatever level is involved in that strategy need to be communicated properly about the various actions and strategy that is going to be implemented. This ensures that the end results are achieved in a much more efficient manner. So the next stage is implementing the change management. So in this stage, the organization has already met up, develop an action plan, resources are allocated, and organizational environment is receptive enough to adjust the change. And maybe there are certain changes need to be adjusted in the plan itself before implementation. So that that changes need to be applied here at this stage. They manage the resistances, they adapt themselves in a new way of working at this stage. So for this particular changes, they requires proper training for the employees. So, or maybe new acquisition of resources is required, and all this change has to be implemented to the plan so that the plan is more effective itself. The next stage of implementation plan is monitoring the process. So once a plan is almost set, then we have to monitor the plan itself, so that we have to make sure that the plan is proper. We have to set the KPIs, we have to set a benchmark to ensure that the plan is working properly, and if implemented will ensure proper success for our strategy. So the matrices or the KPIs or the benchmarks need to be developed and established within the structure, and the performance need to be checked with this matrices. So a plan implemented need to be rechecked continuously so as to ensure that it is working. The regular review of performance against these KPIs should be done. So the efficiency of a plan is proper only when it is up to the KPIs set. We can't just sit back and relax after a action plan is developed. There need to be constant and continuous monitoring against the metrics set, so that the plan is working properly. That is, the plan need to adjust so that it stay on track. That is just the one word for it. So the plan need to be adjusted so that it is working as per the KPI set. The next stage is feedback and adjustment. In this stage, the various stakeholders are providing their feedbacks will be gathered, and various certain adjustments required in the strategy will be implemented, so that the challenges and opportunities will be addressed accordingly. So next stage, the last stage is evaluation and control. We will see this stage in detail for the next stage of strategic management itself. But let me just give a clarity on evaluation. Evaluation is nothing other than checking the efficiency of the plan itself. So in the implementation stage itself, we'll check whether the implemented plan is effective to the current situation of the organization, so that the end goals are achieved in a proper manner. Let's brush up through the implementation stage once again. So let's start off to you. So implementation stage is the actual action stage, where the plan formed in paper is put into action against the organizational objectives, so that the objectives are met in a more efficient manner. And it could be either forward linking or backward linking. Forward linking implementation means the strategy is formed, and now the organization has to adjust, or the resources has to be adjusted based on the strategy formed. And in backward linking implementation, The strategies are according based on the available resources and structure of the organization, and this is based on circumstances. Whereas forward linking gives proper direction of implementation. Forward linking is more effective for the organizational growth, whereas backward linking is just a turnarounds. It's more, suitable for turnaround strategy, retrenchment. I hope you remember we have the retrenchment turnaround strategies we have discussed in the what survival level in alternative strategy implementations, alternative strategies. So then we have seen the steps in strategy implementation. First step was developing an action plan. Then once the action plan is developed and gives clarity on specific tasks, timelines, responsibilities, and resources, the next stage is resource allocation. In this stage, the organization accumulates and allocates properly the financial, human, technological skill sets, etc. They are being allocated to which department to perform the required strategic implementation. So optimum resources will be allocated so that the maximum efficiency is recouped. Then the third stage is adjust organizational structure. Then once the environment is set, it is the strategy or the action plan will be communicated to the stakeholders, and this ensures resistance is reduced. Then next stage is implementation of the changes required. Once that is done, the proper monitoring will be happening. Monitoring against the KPIs or benchmarks. KPIs means key performance indicators. And the plans will be adjusted so that it stays on track. Then the next stage is feedback and adjustment. Once it is monitored, if there is any gap with the proper feedback, this will be put into in line with the organizational objective. And then finally, evaluation. Now, the third stage of strategic management will be look into evaluation and control in detail. So, the third stage of strategic management is evaluation and control. Evaluation means estimating the effectiveness of the strategy. It is nothing other than understanding how effective and efficient the strategy we have formed and implemented is in action. So, this stage, the organization will check whether the strategy formed and implemented in the organization is effective in the current situation, or presently if it is working or not, or if it stops working after a certain period. So if there is any deviation, they make the corrective action. So there are chances that the organization has implemented a strategy and the strategy was performing itself at the time of implementation, but over time, there need certain changes so that the strategy could perform more effectively. So in that cases, the organization has to continuously evaluate and make proper control measures so that it is still working and active for the organizational objectives. So that is called strategic evaluation and control. Now let's see the importance of strategic evaluation. As we have discussed, strategic evaluation is important for getting feedbacks and appraisals. So if the organization doesn't do any evaluation, the organization won't be able to generate feedback. So if feedback is not available, they won't be able to grow forward. So the organization won't be able to adjust or make further changes in the organization if feedback is not available. So strategic evaluation helps the organization to get further feedbacks on the strategy and make necessary changes within the strategy. If a strategy requires corrective action, for example, the strategy was working perfectly fine and there has been a lot of changes happened in the market or in the organization, in the environment where the organization is performing. So proper evaluation will help the organization to understand what changes has been happened in the external or internal environment, and once that is received, they can change their plan, they can make corrective action so that the strategy will suit the present conditions. It helps to understand the gap between the expected and the final. That is the gap between the expected performance and final performance. And if feedbacks are received, they can reduce this gap identified. It's very important for the organization to reduce the gap so that it is in line with the strategic plans. And second importance is verifying the strategic choice. That is making the strategy in line with the organizational objective itself. So the organizational objective, for example, if the organization has set an objective to achieve like 100 crore profit in the next 5 years, and the strategy they have implemented has been done according to the studies undertaken. However, recently the organization might have faced a backlog or a decline in their sales, and they won't be able to contribute or they won't be able to adjust their finance accordingly to perform. So they have to make sure that they have to analyze and evaluate their present strategy so that the strategy will be in line with the organizational objective. They have to take active actions to ensure that the first set objective is still in action. And this helps to avoid deviation itself. So if the organization or the strategy implemented has been deviated from the plan set, they need to make corrective action to make effective solutions to ensure that the plan we have set is in action and the final objectives we have set is achieved at the certain period we have set. The next importance for evaluation is ensuring successful strategic management. So efficiency in strategic management is very important for achieving the objectives with the available resources. So proper strategic evaluation at the right time or right interval or continuous strategic evaluation ensures that the efficiency is met. If there is any lethargy, if there is any lag, or if there is a deviation identified, it ensures that the strategy is developed or revamped so that the efficiency is the main point of our final goal, and the strategy could be adjusted so that efficiency is in line with the objectives or the plan is in line with the objectives so that it is achieved in an efficient manner with there may be sometimes the strategy we have developed is developed at a time maybe a year back. The strategy has been developed a year back and implemented at that time. If there is no continuous evaluation happening and we're still following those steps. However, the market has changed and there has been new technology, new further processes has been new products has been launched and technology has been developed, and we are still following the superannuated methods we have made 1 year back. There will be a loop, there will be a leakage of our cost happening. So it is very important for the organization to recheck and go back to the strategy and reevaluate so that our strategies implemented are efficient enough to cope up with the present situation. And it also helps in future plannings of the strategy. For example, the present strategy, if not checked and if not evaluated properly over time, it won't be able to contribute to the future strategy set. For example, the organization might have redeveloped its model recently, and the strategies followed were set for a different period of time, for a different set of stakeholders, and it has not been rechecked or reevaluated recently. There will be a gap, and further strategies won't be implemented in an efficient manner. So, for the sake of development of new strategy, it is very important to reevaluate. Evaluation of the strategy need all the strategies need to be in action. So these are the four importance of strategic evaluation. Let's see the points again. So it helps in identification of the feedback or getting feedbacks, appraisals and rewards, help in verifying the strategic choices, helps in successful implementation of strategic management and efficiency, helps in further planning of the new strategies. It gives a base for the new strategy. Now let's see strategic control. So strategic control measures are the monitoring actions or corrective actions undertaken so that the organization makes sure the actions undertaken, the plans undertaken is in line with the organizational objective. So there will be process control happening so that the deviations are identified, the gaps, it is nothing other than the gap analysis, between what is expected and what is actually happening. So if there is a gap identified, the organization has to make corrective actions, control measures so that the gap is lessened and proper actions are undertaken so that the deviation has been corrected and the final objectives are achieved in line with what we have planned. So control measures create measuring systems and they involves creating the procedures and techniques for measuring the performances. For example, there will be corrective actions undertaken so that our KPIs will be revamped so that the initial goals are achieved or initial performance metrics will be followed correct in the correct measures. So corrective actions were followed and the final objectives are achieved well. So strategic control ensures that comparing actual performance with our expected performance, actual performance with our expected performance is done. That is, if an organization has set for 5 million sales this year, and the by mid-month or mid-year, the organization has not achieved what is expected. So the organization has to evaluate the strategies and they have to make corrective actions so that with the next half year they will be able to achieve the set goals. So it helps in comparing the actual performance with the corrective action with the expected performance, and corrective actions will be undertaken so that the gaps will be lessened. There are mainly 4 types of control measures. First is premise control. Second is implementation control. The third is strategic surveillances. And the fourth kind of control is special alert control. So let's see each of the control measures in detail. So premise control is nothing other than controlling the assumption. So checking or monitoring the assumptions. For example, all the strategic measures undertaken or formed are based on some assumptions or environmental analysis. We have seen in the formation stage, give me a second. In the formation stage, we have seen that strategy formation is done based on the internal and external audit. So in the implementation stage and evaluation and control stage, these things might have changed. The environment we have analyzed or scanned has changed. So there has been a lot of changes happen. So the organization need to ensure the these kind of controls. The premise control measures helps to ensure that the control measures undertaken will check that whether the assumptions we have undertaken at the time of strategy formation is still valid or not. The environmental scanning happened at that time is still valid at the time of implementation itself. For example, the economy might be in a boom at the time when the organization has developed a particular strategy formation. For example, in case of marketing itself, the um, organization might have planned for a year-end marketing process with one or a particular amount. At that time, the economy might be in boom. But however, at the time of implementation, the economy is in recession. So these type of control measures ensures that the premises or the assumptions undertaken at the time of the strategy formation is in line at the time of strategy implementation itself. If there has been a deviation or a change in the economy or a change in the assumptions based on which we made our strategies has changed, then certain measures need to be undertaken so that the formatted strategy is changed accordingly so as to suit the present environmental condition. For example, the organization itself was growing at the time of making a strategy. They might be looking forward for an expansion in the next 2 years at the time when the organization was growing. However, due to maybe a calamity or a war, the organization is facing a setback. So the organization need to have a premise control measure to ensure that their strategy is changed to suit the present condition. So that is called premise control. Premise control helps to regularly or systematically check the assumptions at the time of strategic formation so that it analyzes or it checks whether it is still valid at the time of implementation. So premise control is nothing other than monitoring or checking the validity of the assumptions or the validity of the conditions based on which the environmental conditions based on which we have made the strategy, and they ensures that these conditions are still valid before it is implemented. The second control mechanism we are going to discuss is the implementation control. So as the name suggests, this kind of control mechanism ensures that the plans we have formed and the strategy we have implemented is in line. So the plans formed will be valid enough at the time of implementation. So if there is a deviation happened from planning, from the strategy formation, at the time of implementation, the organization could take corrective action so that the plan will be valid enough for the time of implementation itself. This ensures that the plan is in track with the execution level. This implementation control helps to identify the gap between the plan and execution. So the keywords here is planning and execution, and implementation control mechanism helps to ensure that the organization's strategy implementation will happen accordingly to the plans made and to the present condition at the time of implementation. The third kind of control mechanism is strategic surveillance. So, from the name itself, surveillance. So, there's something based on information. So, what is that something? The organization makes plans and control mechanisms are made based on the information they receive, based on the changes in the inside and outside of the organization. So strategic surveillance is nothing other than monitoring the changes happen inside and outside the organization based on the information available. So the organization will get some information. Their audit firms or their research and development team will be able to find some information based on the inside and outside changes in the organization, and these control measures help the organization to be intact or in line with the changes happened, so that the final objective set by the organization is without much cost leakage. Proper efficiency could be in line with the organization's requirement. And the final control mechanism we are going to discuss is special alert control mechanism. In special alert control mechanism, as the name suggests, there is this alert. That means these control mechanisms are developed for a contingency situation. So the organization might already have developed a plan to deal with a particular contingency or emergency. What they do is they made these plans so that to tackle an unforeseen circumstances. So these kind of control measures are used at the time of an unforeseen situation. However, the strategies will be already made in advance. So there will be alternative strategies made along with the present strategy implemented. So they will implement these strategies immediately at the time of a contingency identified. So the four types of control mechanism are premise control mechanism, implementation control mechanism, strategic surveillance, and special alert control. In premise control, as the name suggests, premise, so assumption, the environment around the organization. So these control mechanisms helps the organization to check whether the assumptions based on which the strategy has been formulated is still valid. They'll look into the so any organization developing their strategies, they made environmental scanning, right? So these kind of control mechanism helps the organization to check whether the environmental scanning done at the time of the formation is still valid at the time of implementation. So if there is any gap identified, they can make necessary changes so that the plan or the strategy developed is implemented properly. Second stage, as we discussed, implementation control. As the name suggests, these are the control mechanisms to ensure that the plans developed is implemented according to the objective set. If there is any deviation, they will put it back into track. And the next control mechanism is strategic surveillance. As the name suggests, it is based on the information received, based on the inside and outside changes happen in the organization, and they identify these changes and the strategic, the formatted strategies changed accordingly or controlled accordingly so that is implemented and effective, implemented so as to get the organizational objective in an effective manner. And the last control mechanism is special alert control. As the name suggests, it is for an emergency situation or contingency situation. The alternative strategies will be formed initially itself, and once a critical situation is identified, they immediately change the current plan or current strategy, and the alternative strategy made according to the situation will be implemented at the time. So these are the control mechanisms. So we have come to an end to this session of strategic management. Now we'll brush up through all the contents we have discussed. So we have, in the first session, we have gone through what is strategy. Strategy is a collection of integrated actions for achieving a competitive advantage over the competitors. Competitive advantage means the advantages an organization have which their competitors doesn't have. These give an added advantage to the organization. Strategic management, rather than formulating, implementing, and evaluating these strategies formed. It helps the organization to deal with its threats and find out new opportunities, and strategic management is change oriented. Then we have seen what are the stages of strategic management. The first stage is strategic formation. Second stage is strategic implementation, and the final stage is strategic evaluation and control. So I am going through this content again because it's very important. These are the formation stages, very important. All stages are important. However, the formation stage has got a lot of terminologies we need to focus on. So the first stage is strategic formation. Strategic formation consists of strategic intent. Strategic intent means the vision, mission, business definition, goals, and objectives. Vision is what the company wants to be, and mission is how the mission is how the vision gives an understanding of how the vision is attained, and vision is the founding father's goal. All right. for the organization. Then business definition. Business definition is nothing other than all about the business. It's give, but the business is all about. It gives an idea on the customer group, the customer functions, and alternative technologies. Then we have seen what are goals. Goals are qualitative in nature, whereas objectives are quantitative in nature. So after strategic intent, we have seen the next stage of strategy formation is external audit. External audit is nothing other than external environmental scanning. So external environment has got two parts, the micro environment and the macro environment. Macro environment is general, larger environment outside the organization which impacts the organizational activities. So external environment can be done with the pestle analysis tools. For why external environment is important, because external environment helps the organization to identify the opportunities which is outside the organization, opportunities, and deal with the threats are also outside. In SWOT analysis we have seen opportunities, threats, strength, and weakness. So strength and weakness are internal to the organization, whereas opportunities and threats are external to the organization. So macro environment analysis helps the organization to understand the opportunities they have and to deal with the threats of the organization. And then external audits or environment analysis could be done through pestle factors for the macro environment. And for the micro environment, it can be a micro environment is smaller environment within the, it is industry specific. So they are also outside the organization, but within the industry. It's not the generic environment. And the micro environment can be done through Porter's five force model or value chain model. We have seen the Porter's five force model. The five forces are rivalry among the existing competitors, threats of substitutes, bargaining power of customers, bargaining power of suppliers, and entry threats from the new entrants. And then value chain, we have seen value chain has got primary activities and secondary activities. Primary activities are inbound logistics, operations, outbound logistics, marketing and sales, then services. And the secondary activities are supportive activities are firm's infrastructure, human resource management, technology and development, and procurement. Then we have seen the internal audit factors. Internal audit is nothing other than internal environmental analysis, which is self-appraisal of the organization, and it identifies the strength and weakness. Strength and weakness are internal to the organization. So it helps the organization to rely on its strength to deal with the weaknesses they have, and this could be done through EFE, that is external factor evaluation metrics or internal factor evaluation metrics. External factor evaluation metrics help the organization to understand or access the external opportunities with the internal strengths, and internal factor evaluation helps to deal with the internal opportunities and threats based on the internal strength itself. Then we have seen the generic strategy alternatives. The first generic strategy is stability. Stability is done at the time when the organization couldn't grow. So this might be at the time of a recession or at the stages or the market of monopoly, or if the organization doesn't have any resources. They have already reached the saturation in their this organizational growth metrics. Then the second generic strategy is growth strategy, and growth strategy we can identify through we can understand through of metrics, and the answer the three stages: the market penetration, product development, and market development. These three stages are called intensification, and the final stage is diversification. Diversification happens when a new product is introduced into a new market. We have seen the different levels of diversification or different categories of diversification. Diversification can be related diversification and unrelated diversification. Related diversification is again integration and conglomerate, concentric diversification. The integrated diversification can be vertical or horizontal. That is, vertical means forward or backward. Forward means towards the customer, backward means towards the supplier. And horizontal. Horizontal is nothing other than it is not moving in the supply chain. The other two, vertical and forward and backward, is moving in the supply chain. In unrelated diversification, it could be conglomerate or synergic. Then we have seen the defensive strategy alternatives, that is moving backward. Or if when the organization cannot move forward or they cannot stay at where they are, they have to move backward or they have to take a step back to ensure that they survive. So moving backward can either be turnaround strategy or divestments. Then if that is also not possible, they can go for liquidation. And if all these things fail, they have to go for bankruptcy. Then we have seen the corporate, business, and functional level strategies. Business level business level strategy is the lower level strategies, which are individual level. Then functional level strategy, which is the departmental level strategies or various functional level within the organization. Corporate level strategy is the top level strategy, which involves top level management and could result in total restructuring of the organization. And then in today's session, we have detailed about the strategic implementations and the last is strategic evaluation and control. In the implementation level, we have seen implementation means implementing, or it's the actual action stage where the formatted strategy based on what we have just seen is implemented into the organizational levels or various levels of the organization and to achieve the final objective. So why it is implemented? To achieve the objectives or to deal with the certain requirements of the organization. So it could be either forward linking or backward linking. Forward linking means the strategies are developed and now the organization has to adjust. All the resources has to be adjusted so as to deal, so as to accommodate the strategy. Whereas backward linking means this strategy is developed according to the current situations in the organization or availability of the resources. Then we have seen the steps in strategic implementation. The strategic implementation is done with developing an action plan. Action plan is developed based on the set goals and objectives. It gives further clarity on specific tasks to be undertaken, at what duration each task to be done, and when with the start time and end time of each specific activities, then the responsibility, who's going to be responsible for each stages, who's going to be accountable, who's going to implement these stages. All these things will be cleared and the resources required. The resources, the human resources, the finance, the technology, etc., will be cleared with the proper action plan. Then next, resource allocation. Resource allocation, at this stage, the organization has to acquire and allocate optimum resources. Optimum is the keyword here. Whatever is required for achieving the result, that is the optimum. Optimum resources should be identified and allocated at this stage. It could be either budgeting or maybe hiring, training, whatever the skill set could be allocated, the finance could be allocated, the technology should be allocated at the right time to the right department to achieve the optimum requirement or to achieve the efficiency or to achieve the final objectives of the organization. Then third stage is just organizational structure. The organizational environment need to be receptive at this stage. The or structure need to be organizational structure need to be in line with the strategy we have developed, and there need to be proper communications channel developed so that it is being communicated properly. So next stage is communication itself. Communication means the strategy developed and going to be implemented need to be communicated properly to the various uh, levels of the organization which are involved in the strategic implementation. So they have to know what need to be done, who need to be done, how it is to be done, when it is to be done. These things need to be communicated properly so that the resistance could be reduced and proper clarity is there, and people will understand what role they need to perform. And this ensures that the final goals are achieved in an efficient manner. So the next stage is implementing the change. If there is a change required in the plan we have set or the strategy we have set, the organization has to make necessary changes in the plan itself so that resistance could be reduced, and or training need to be given if they need to acquire new people, that need to be done so that the implementation will function smoothly. The next stage is monitoring the process. So at this stage, the organization has to set the KPIs and benchmarks, and the performance need to be checked in align with the KPI set. They have to compare the actual performance with the metrics set, and if there is any gaps identified, the plan has to be adjusted so that it doesn't track with the requirements. Fine. The next stage is feedback and adjustment stage. At this stage, the organization has to collect proper feedback from the stakeholders or the people involved or the departments involved in the implementation, and necessary adjustments to the strategy has to be implemented. Unforeseen circumstances and challenges or barriers, resistances need to be identified and clarified. They need to be corrected at this stage. Then final evaluation stage. Evaluation is nothing other than checking the efficiency of the plan we are going to implement or we have implemented. So this ensures that the final objectives are achieved with proper efficient in a proper efficient manner. With efficient manner means with less cost and more accuracy. And the last stage is strategic evaluation and control. Strategic evaluation is nothing other than, as we mentioned, discussed just now, it's checking the efficiency of a strategy. It ensures that the evaluation ensures that the strategy itself is success. They check whether if it is a success, they'll continue it. If it is, if the strategy is not so performing at the time of evaluation and control, they will make necessary just the strategy or corrective actions to the strategy so that it could perform it. And they need a, and in that stage, if the organization identifies that the strategy is not performing, it has gone superannuated, so it's not performing at the stage, they need a proper revamping of the strategy, and further corrective actions will be taken or a new strategy will be implemented. The major important factors for strategy, the importance of strategic evaluation is getting proper feedback. That is the major importance. So that corrective actions could be implemented at the right time. Then verifying the strategic choices. This helps to avoid deviations. Then ensuring successful strategic management. That is to ensure that efficiency is intact. Then further planning of strategies. So the present strategy evaluation will act as a baseline for the new strategy. Then we have seen strategic control. Control is nothing other than monitoring the existing strategy. So they'll check whether the strategy implemented has deviated from its course of action. If a gap is identified, corrective actions will be undertaken so that the strategy will be the plans undertaken will be bring back into line so that the final objectives are achieved in a better manner. Deviations will be identified, and this is a stage where gap analysis will be done and corrective actions will be undertaken at the right time. Then we have seen the type of control mechanisms. So there are 4 types of control: premise control, implementation control, strategic surveillance, and special alert control. So premise control is nothing other than checking the validity of the premises and assumptions at the time of developing the strategy, and check whether it is valid enough at the time of implementation. So the second one is implementation control itself. Implementation control means checking whether the plans undertaken or the programs and projects undertaken is implemented correctly. If there is any deviation, if a gap is identified between the plan and execution, then it will be corrective actions will be undertaken so that a proper plan, the plan will be brought back to the initial strategies identified, and so that the execution will be happening in line and final objectives are achieved in a proper manner. Then strategic surveillance. Strategic surveillance means based on the changes in the inside and out, the information received from the changes in the inside and outside environment of the organization will make changes accordingly so that the strategic objectives are achieved in a perfect manner. Then special alert control. Special alert control, the name suggests, is for an emergency situation or for a contingency situation. These plans, alternative strategies will be developed earlier itself, and once an emergency or contingency is identified, the plans will be changed according to the situation or contingency and will be implemented accordingly so that efficiency is attained and final objectives are achieved in a proper manner. That's it. So we have seen the various stages of strategic management. And thank you so much. I hope you all understood what we have discussed. In case you have any query, get back to your coordinator. I'll give the slides. I'll share the slides to the coordinator and he'll share it with you. I hope the session was useful to you. If you have any query, you may feel free to write to me or to the coordinator. I'll clear the queries. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for your patience and time. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Okay, thank you, Mom. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, madam.
Thank you, madam.